Hello, dear friends. Today's piece is monothematic because of the importance of the subject matter, which is the feminine energy of the creator and its cultural symbols. I cannot summarize it any further, because the subject has so many details and nuances. The feminine energy fascinates me, and sometimes scares me, like a child when she turns into a wicked witch. Opinion piece. The Atlantean Goddess, the sacred feminine. When God was a woman, the movement of the goddess, the treasure of the white goddess, Sophia, mother of wisdom, Isis, mother of all magic, Tara, mother of liberation. Reactivation of the Atlantean grid, opening of the entrances to Agartha, recreation of the temples of the goddess, representation of the feminine energy. Feminine energy is always positive. Feminine mysteries of divine creation. We are in the midst of a great transformation. The Da Vinci Code rebuilt the circuit feminine. The patriarchal conquest came to Europe in 400 before Christ. The black Italian nobility perverted this movement. Mozart, Cagliostro and Saint Germain were initiates. European Goddess Vortex in Venice, Paris and Budapest. Nurturing qualities of compassion, gentleness and love. Let's start. While the forces of light are trying to bring as much light as possible to the surface of the planet in their project of the return of the spirit, the ancient Atlantean light grid is being reactivated according to a new piece by the famous contactee Cobra. A very important aspect of that process is the reactivation of the ancient Atlantean goddess vortexes, connected to the ancient Atlantean equator that was much farther north and ran through France and southern England. The term sacred feminine was first coined in the 70s in popularizations of the Hindu Shakti. It then became more widespread in the 90s by Andrew Harvey and others and was enshrined in popular culture in 2003 with Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. It emphasizes femininity, being the womb of creation and the ability to reproduce. Feminine energy is always positive because it is creative and transformative. The sacred feminine is attributed with receptive, silent, passive, slow, fluid, sensitive and creative qualities. Its element is water, and its organ is the heart. The sacred masculine has qualities of action, swiftness, fearlessness, boldness, strength and enthusiasm. Its element is fire, and its organ is the brain. Balancing these two powerful energies, the feminine and the masculine, enables us to live our lives consciously. Movement of the goddess. The goddess movement is a general trend in spiritual beliefs that emerged mainly in North America, Western Europe, Australia and New Zealand in the 70s. Many ancient cultures worshipped goddesses, and in part this worship also continues to the present day. The idea of conceptual representation of these deities, as well as their area of action, has often been associated with fertility, motherhood, or other common female figures. However, there are also goddesses of wisdom, the sea, or knowledge. My favorite is Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, patron of alchemists. In Hinduism, Shakti designates the energy of a deity personified as his wife. Every Hindu female deity is called Devi and is associated with fertility, and her potency is understood as Shakti, being the representation of energy, and in turn the origin of Mara or Prakriti. In the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Tara is the mother of liberation and represents the virtues of success in work and achievement. In analytical psychology, Carl Gustav Jung, referring to the collective unconscious, develops primordial images or archetypes such as the goddess. Shakti, as an archetypal image, is the feminine part or anima, and Shiva, the masculine part or animus, of the universal couple, implying the reconciliation of opposites coming together. Benevolent societies. When God Was a Woman is the title of a book written by American sculptor and art historian Marilyn Stone. The book describes archetypical reflections of women as leaders, sacred entities, and benevolent matriarchs, and also frames them in a larger picture of how our modern society grew to its current state of global imbalance. The peaceful, benevolent matriarchal societies of goddess-worshipping traditions were attacked, undermined, and eventually almost completely destroyed by the ancient tribes, including the Hebrews, and later by the early Christians. To do this, they sought to destroy any visible symbol of the sacred feminine, including works of art, sculptures, textiles, and literature. The reason is that they wanted the sacred masculine to become the dominant power and rule over women and the energies of the goddess, breaking the natural balance. The White Goddess. The famous British writer Robert Graves, author of I, Claudius and the White Goddess, who lived in the Mallorca in the Sierra de Tramontana region, researched Greek myths and popularized the triad of Virgin, Mara, and Old Witch, and his poetic inspiration has been widely accepted. Some, however, find this triad incomplete and prefer to add a fourth aspect, the Black Goddess or Wise Woman. Graves proposes the existence of a European deity, the White Goddess of birth, love, and death, much like the Mother Goddess, inspired and represented by the phases of the moon, who hides behind the faces of various goddesses from various European and pagan mythologies. Graves believes that pure or true poetry is linked to the ancient cult of this white goddess and her son. Graves reconstructs what he considers to be the magical language of ancient Mediterranean and Northern Europe, linked to popular religious ceremonies in honor of the moon goddess. He recounts how in Europe and the Near East there were matriarchal cultures that worshipped a supreme goddess and recognized male gods as her sons or consorts. These cultures were wiped out by the eruption of patriarchy, which took away women's authority, elevated the goddess consorts to a position of divine supremacy, and reconstructed myths and rituals to hide the past. According to the author, the patriarchal conquest reached Europe around 400 before Christ. Graves returned after the war and remained in the Ya until his last days. He used the Ya as the setting for many of his stories, such as the historical novel Hercules, My Fellow Traveler. His house is now a museum. I always admired this writer. Many artists choose the Ya to live a life full of beauty and inspiration. Since the 60s and 70s, artists have flocked to the Ya, and since then, incredible works of art and legends have been created. Mother Goddess. A Mother Goddess is a deity who serves as a representation of feminine energy and fertility. He is also represented in some cultures as the Earth Mother, and the goddess of fertility being the bountiful personification of the earth and life in general. In Western traditions, the Mother Goddess was represented in many ways, from the stone-carved images of the goddess Cybele to the goddess Dione, who was invoked together with the god Zeus in the oracle of Dodona, Greece, until the end of the classical period. Among Homer's hymns, there is one dedicated to the mother goddess called Haim to Gaia, mother of all. The Sumerians wrote many poems about their mother goddess Nihunshag. Some authors argue that the cult of the mother goddess was the origin of the cult that Catholics and other denominations of Christianity give to Mary, such as the invocations of the black pigeons. The origin of these images is explained as the adoption by the popular Christian cult in its first centuries of iconographic elements and attributes of ancient female fertility deities, whose faces were made of ivory and whose cult was widespread throughout the late Roman Empire, such as Isis, Cybele, and Artemis. As a result, examples of these visions can be found all over Europe. Isis, being a goddess of African origin, is black in most representations. Mother Earth and her equivalence as Mother Goddess is a theme that appears in many mythologies. Mother Earth is the personification of the earth, generally depicted in various cultures as goddess representing the fertile earth and mother of other deities, in which they are seen as patronesses of motherhood. This was generally believed because the earth was seen as the mother of all life that grew on it. Temples of Atlantis. In the time of Atlantis, powerful temples were built across the equator and had a direct connection to the motherships of the Galactic Confederation that were stationed directly above them in geostationary orbit, according to Cobra. These temples anchored the divine energy of the goddess on the planet's surface, while the polar temples anchored the divine masculine energy. The goddess temples always had a sacred lake located nearby, where the goddess Vortex was anchored through a female angelic being under the guidance of Iona. The forces of light are reactivating the locations of these Atlantean goddess temples. One of the main locations reactivated is Baalbek in Lebanon, where there was a goddess temple with a mystery school from the time of Atlantis. Long after the flood, goddess Agartha returned from Syria to the region and reactivated the mystery of the goddess. Many temples to Agartha with sacred lakes were built in the area, with major temples at Hierapolis, modern Manbij in Syria, with the sacred lake turned into a football field, Ashkelon, Outbet El Bedawi, with the sacred lake destroyed and covered with urban settlements, and Edessa, modern Urfa, with the sacred lake still exists and has a tunnel leading to great depth. In addition to the vortexes connected with Agartha, the forces of light are also reactivating vortexes connected with the triple goddesses Al-Lat, Al-Utha, and Manat, which originate in pre-Islamic Arabia. These vortices are also found in the ancient Atlantean equator. Entrances to Agartha along the ancient Atlantean equator, such as the cave near Ephesus, are also being energetically reactivated. The Cave of the Seven Sleepers is a medieval legend about a group of young men who hid inside a cave outside the city of Ephesus, present-day Selçukdaki, around 250 after Christ, to escape one of the Roman persecutions of Christians, and emerged young some 300 years later. Vortex. The European vortex triangle of the goddess is also reactivated with double vortexes in Venice, Paris, and Budapest, all close to the Atlantean equator. All three of these double vortexes have the main vortex in the city, and the secondary vortex about 10 to 30 miles from the main vortex. Both vortices are connected to each other with an infinite energy flow of the number 8 or Vesica Piscis. The Venice vortex is anchored at the Rialto Bridge in Venice. The Venice goddess Vortex gave birth to the mysteries of the goddess during the Renaissance through the Buccintor order. In 1512, the headquarters of the order was established in Murano, and from there the Buccintor order created an extensive network throughout Italy, Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. It was founded in 1510 in Venice by a Venetian doge named Leonardo Loredan, a member of one of the most important white noble families of Venice. At that time, he was one of the most spiritually developed people in the West, and is now an ascended being, not to be confused with Paolo Veronese, known as the Venetian Master, who was an Italian Renaissance painter based in Venice, known for extremely large historical paintings of religion and mythology, such as the marriage at Cana and the feast at the house of Levi. Ceremonial barge. The name Bucintoro originates from an ancient Venetian legend. Once upon a time, there was a magnificent golden ship which carried the famous doge to heaven. In the republics of Venice and Genoa, the doge was the supreme prince or magistrate. Now, we could easily describe that ship as an ascension mothership and the process as a transmission or teleportation. Bucintoro was officially the name of the state barge of Venice, and secretly the code name for the mothership of the Galactic Confederation. The Bucentaur or Bucintoro was the ceremonial barge of the Doges of Venice. It was used every year on Ascension Day until 1798 to take the Doge to the Adriatic Sea to perform the sea wedding, a ceremony that symbolically linked Venice to the sea. Scholars believed that there were four main barges, the first major Bucentaur being built in 1311. The last and most magnificent of the historic Bucentaurs made its maiden voyage in 1729. The barge was propelled by 168 oarsmen, and another 40 sailors were required to crew it. The ship was destroyed in 1798 by order of Napoleon to symbolize his victory in the conquest of Venice. In February 2008, the Bucintoro Foundation announced a €20 million project to rebuild the 1729 Bucentauro. Work began on 15th March in 2008 in the shipyard and naval dock of the Arsenale. The Bucintoro Foundation hopes the ship will become the most visited floating museum in the world, but also sees the project as a means to help Venice regain its former glory and old spirit. Overrun by so many millions of tourists, the city risks losing its identity, losing its cultural connection to its own history. It's not enough to live in the future. The city needs to connect with and remember its glorious past. In 1516, Giulietta Montefeltro, an initiate of the Order of the Star, joined the Bucintoro Order. She was a priestess of the goddess Venus. Venus is a patron goddess of Venice, being one of the main planetary goddesses of that goddess. As an initiate of the Order of the Star, Giulietta knew the secret of immortality and ascension, and communicated it to the Bucintoro Order through an occult doctrine called Spiritus Eros. The Bucintoro Order. The purpose of the Bucintoro Order was to prepare humankind for a new age, then expected to arrive around the year 2000. It envisioned human sovereignty free from the influence of the Roman Church, humans determining their own destiny and being respected according to their merit and not their lineage. A new financial system was planned that would prohibit interest and prevent the misuse and hoarding of wealth. The members of the Buccintor order have planned their incarnations carefully in the time span of 500 years until the year 2000 to prepare the planets for the coming of the new epoch. They are in possession of Garil, the white stone of the Holy Grail, no less. Saint Germain, Cagliostro, and Casanova were all initiated into the Buccintor order in Venice. Casanova became a priest of the Venus there. Cagliostro became a priest of Isis and created Mizraim, a system that attempted to renew the mysteries of Isis after almost 2,000 years of inactivity. Unfortunately, most of the Mizraim lodges were infiltrated by the Jesuits almost immediately and were misused by the Italian black nobility for their purposes. Mozart was another priest of Isis who communicated the mysteries of Isis through his music and was initiated into the mysteries through a certain Templar society with strong connections to the Buccintor order in Untersberg near Salzburg. After the fall of the Venetian Republic, the outer form of the Buccintor order was dissolved and Mizraim, a certain positive lodge in Venice, took its place. The occult presence of the Buccintor order had a great influence on planetary events and was inspiring people behind the scenes to reach for the stars and develop a space program. Unfortunately, that program was manipulated by the Archons and the Chimera group through the Brill and Thule societies. Otto Skorzeny, a member of the Thule Society, attempted to recreate the Buccintor order and abuse it for negative purposes together with a member of a black nobility, Junius Valerio Borghese, and renamed it the Palazzo Stern Order. His attempts were fortunately unsuccessful. The Academy of the Unknown. The white noble families Loredan and Mocenigo carried the mysteries of the goddess in Venice. Both families have roses in their coat of arms. The Loredan family was also expressing the mysteries of the goddess through the Academy of the Unknowns, also called the Loredanian Academy, which was a Lent society of free-thinking intellectuals, mainly nobles, who significantly influenced the cultural and political life of mid-17th century Venice. The society was founded in 1630 by Giovanni Francesco Loredan and Guido Casoni, and derived its basic Aristotelian philosophy from Cesare Cremonini, a peripatetic who was a professor of philosophy at the University of Padua. The society included historians, poets, and librettists. The Academy operated behind the scenes. Members often wrote in a secret language and frequently published their work anonymously. The Academy of the Unknowns was particularly active in promoting musical theatre in Venice from the 1630s onwards, founding its own theatre, the Teatro Novissimo, which flourished briefly between 1641 and 1645. In their librettos for musical dramas, the iconoclastic intellectuals of the Academy set a tone that was often surprisingly frank and frequently amoral for the mores of the time. Among these librettists were Giacomo Baduaro, who wrote The Return of Ulysses to his native land, for Claudio Monteverdi, and Giovanni Francesco Busenello, who provided Monteverdi with the libretto for the composer's final and arguably greatest operatic work, The Coronation of Poppaea. Vortexes. The secondary vortex of Venice is anchored in Villa dei Vesconi in the Euganean Hills. This villa is actually an ascension chamber. This secondary vortex is also connected to Agartha. There are many smaller goddess vortexes in northern Italy, not far from the ancient Atlantean equator, such as one in Arezzo and another in Parma, where Maria Luisa was an initiated priestess of the goddess. The Paris goddess vortex is anchored in the crypt of the Church of Notre Dame. There are many other smaller anchor points of this vortex throughout Paris, such as the original Dendera Zodiac in the Louvre and its modern counterpart in Le Bodin shop. The secondary vortex in Paris is anchored in the Temple of Love in the Petit Trianon in Versailles. The statue in the middle of the temple was originally a statue of Venus and was later replaced by a statue of Cupid. As a small sacred lake around the temple anchors the energies of Agartha. The white Bourbon noble family supported the mysteries of the goddess in Paris and Versailles through two high priestesses, Madame de Pompadour and the Princess of Lamballe. The goddess vortex of Budapest is anchored in the crown of Saint Stephen, now in the Hungarian parliament. The secondary vortex of the goddess of Budapest is anchored in Godolo Castle, the home of Queen Sisi, who was a high priestess of the goddess. Temples of the goddess. The forces of light have communicated that temples of the goddess must be recreated again on the surface of this planet after more than 1,500 years of suppression. The Brotherhood of the Rose has been entrusted with this sacred task. It is necessary to create public spaces that bring the energy of the goddess to the general surface population. This can be your private space that is open to the general public at least a few hours a week, and can bring the energy of the goddess to the people through meditations, dances, readings, and music. An example of a modern temple of the goddess is in the UK. 2022 marked the 20th anniversary of the founding of the Goddess Temple in Glastonbury, Somerset, in the Glastonbury Experience courtyard. They held their first goddess ceremony at the Symbolic Temple in 2002, bringing their light to the temple, where it was spent ever since. They commemorated the anniversary with an annual celebration, bringing renewed ceremonies, gatherings, goddess events, and exhibitions, music, poetry, storytelling, and dance throughout 2022. There is also another goddess temple in Sabadell, Barcelona, and another in Mexico founded by Alejandro Reyes Ortiz. The goddess is the sun and the rain that fertilizes the earth. She is also the lightning that burns and the storm. She is the air we breathe, and at the same time the hurricane. She is the abundance of the golden fields and the earthquake. She is one who gives us life and devours it. The goddess is nature, and the universe itself and each of its parts, us and all other beings. So she is not outside but within us, within each being, within every material, for she is creation taking form. And above all, one great truth rules. Nothing remains in the well of matter, there is only change. Change from spring to summer, to autumn to winter and back again. A cyclical transformation that doesn't repeat itself exactly, but draws a double spiral, decreasing and growing again and again, like the path of the moon that draws an infinity with its passage through the days. We belong to a world to which we have a responsibility. It changes everything it touches, and if there is one thing the world needs right now, it is consciousness in change. These temples must be recreated as soon as possible to support the energetic transition of this planet. The goal is to assist each of us in our transformation to prepare to receive the future energies that are beginning to integrate our planet. Isis Astara and her work to bring back the goddess is remembered. We are all in the midst of the great transformation. Many of us are awakening to signs and synchronicities that are manifesting in our lives, in our visions and in our dreams that we cannot explain, leading us to seek answers because we know more than we know. For our conscious evolution, it is vital that we all finally understand that a feminine aspect of the divine is re-emerging in our collective consciousness and aligning ourselves, both men and women, with the feminine mysteries of divine creation. We can all contribute to releasing wealth into the next phase of its spiritual evolution with the nurturing qualities of compassion, gentleness and love. Victory of light. Thanks a lot, dear friends.